Greetings, Earthlings.
Howdy.
How are you guys doing? Who wasn't in my last session? Cool, so I get to reintroduce myself. So I'm Fredric Mitchell. I work for Phase 2.
Hey everybody, we're sharing a mic. I'm Brandon. I also work for Phase 2.
Cool. And today we're just going to talk about a project we've been working on combined in terms of experience for the past 18 months. We thought it was really cool to share with you guys some of the ideas that came out of your taxpayer-funded project. Some of the things that maybe there's some ideas you can kind of pull away from to help with some of your projects. So yeah, this presentation is to kind of talk about the Energy.gov website. We can answer questions about that, and then what we're doing with nodes in general inside of the Energy.gov website. So again, here's our information. I spelled your name right, didn't I?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So if you want to follow us on Twitter or with Drupal.org, here's our information. The slides are on the DrupalCorn website too, by the way, so if you don't want to write them down or whatever, that's fine. I'll come and find you later. All right, Energy.gov. Why don't you talk about Energy.gov?
Sure. So Energy.gov is the main website for the U.S. Department of Energy. The project started, roughly a year and a half ago? It predated me. So the basic idea for the platform was basically the government, or specifically the DOE, was looking to cut costs. They had various different offices underneath the Department of Energy that all kind of had their own thing going. You know, some people had some custom CMS stuff. I think there was a few Drupal installs, just a bunch of, and basically just this hodgepodge of people that were all basically building the same thing, all towards the same goal. And so the Department of Energy contracted us to build a better government website for the Department of Energy. So the idea, see, that's even more fantastic. That's the bullet point. So, you know, we were looking to bring everybody under a single platform. You know, that's good for cost cutting, that's good for consistency, that's good for just, you know, managing, whenever you're dealing with large government bureaucracies, it's really helpful to kind of have them all kind of doing the same sort of thing. So yeah, that's the gist of that.
Cool, yeah, and so, again, the biggest part of this is that we saved you money. Yay! $10 million in savings. So what's happening is, right, it was one of the really big first sites to kind of use Drupal 7. If you remember, Drupal 7 came out right around the beginning of the spring last year. So this is one of the really big ones to use that. It is not multi-site, right? So we have 30 plus offices, not multi-site. It is not domain access, okay? It is a single Drupal installation. And some of the things we're going to show you are ways to kind of answer some of those questions that go into a single Drupal installation, right? So we all know that Drupal by itself can build a blog, can build a nice site, but it implies a really big assumption, which is that you have a few content administrators, okay? You have one or two or maybe up to 3 or 4 people. They're going to have the site administrator role, so they get to see the views and the block admin page. You may have a few people who can add notes and stuff, okay? But it's basically a small team that's maintaining that site. Energy.gov is unique in the sense that we have lots of users from different departments who have different needs about how they want their portion of Energy.gov to look and act, right? So one of the big criticisms of a single platform is governance, right? So if we use a university example, I used to work in a university, right? The sociology department wants their site to look a different way. They want to have maybe 3 columns instead of one big one, right? They have their own editors and content people, and they want to be able to structure their articles and have their workflow, et cetera, whereas the etymology department wants to have something completely different, and the veterinary lab wants to have something completely different, right? Yes, it's easy to say, well, you know, we got this Dell Optiplex sitting over here underneath so-and-so's desk, so we're just going to put Drupal on it and, you know, we'll be fine, okay? Well, from a government perspective, right, that's kind of a waste. I mean, it's not kind of, it's a waste of money, right? Every different department has their own little direction that they go. So now you, as the taxpayer, want to find out more about putting solar panels on your house, yet when you go from the solar website to the Energy Savers website to the comparison to fossil energy website, they all look different, they all have different URLs, there's no relationship between the two, et cetera, and you're just like, ah, screw it, I'll just leave whatever I'm doing, right? So the point of this platform is to not only save money and to bring the people who are creating this content that you paid for, all this research, into a single platform, but to also help you. And I mean you, like literally you, the person who wants to be able to find what they need to find in relationship to our energy infrastructure. All right, so I kind of switched up the slides a little bit, but here's like kind of the Energy.gov homepage. What I was trying to highlight initially was the different regions of how Energy.gov is kind of broken up. Okay, so if we're talking about nodes and display, here's a specific type of display. Do you want to say something about this? Okay. So here we have the news and blogs portion, right? You have the home page, which has this kind of giant hero field, okay, with a nice big graphic, a nice title, slideshow. You've got a nice sidebar with the search thing here. You've got 3 columns here on this home page layout. Got some other stuff on this. In this layout, you literally have 4 different columns, okay? You've got a little sub-menu here. You've got content that continuously updates itself via a blog, and they may add a video or an image that goes right here, and it's a little bit bigger than these other 2, right? You may have just typical news, where it just shows the title and a blurb, and then you have like a consistent link of important people on this news and blog page. And again, it's cool that the main kind of energy people have this for them, their homepage and whatever. What if another office kind of wants this, but they don't want this content? They want something specific to their office, right? How do we do that? And how to use nodes to kind of do that? Here's another type of page, okay? Here's all the offices that are within the Department of Energy, right? There's kind of this joke out there that some candidates actually want to abolish the Department of Energy, and maybe this is one of the reasons why, because we have 1 billion different offices. Right? But at the same time, all of these offices do important things. And each office is going to have a unique need. And again, if you use that same analogy to a university, right? Same thing with departments, same thing with different areas of the university. You have different departments, different needs, different looks and feel, etc. All right, so let's talk about like the basic idea of what nodes do, and that's content.
Sure. So on the Department of Energy website, the main building block of content are just static pages and articles. As it's basically the PR front for the Department of Energy. It's primarily them talking about, here's some cool things we did, here's something neat we researched, and that kind of thing. And then some of the other pieces of content that we use to kind of wrap around that are, like video pieces. We have some interesting mapping displays on the site, photo galleries. What else do we have? The downloads is kind of a new thing. So if you've ever been to a government website, the first thing you probably ran into is like a giant list of PDFs, because that's what they all have. They have all these legacy documents that were scanned like 20 years ago, and now they have it in PDF form. And we've been dealing with that on the DOE site a lot. Just kind of giving context, to like, it's like, yes, you have this PDF, but on the web it's kind of hard to actually search that and all that. So we provide ways for people to come to the site and get like forms and regulations and stuff that need to be filled out for whatever you do. So if you want to put like solar panels on your top of your house or something, we have info for that.
And this is just an example of a download page, right? So it's more than just a link to a PDF, because like you said, the government has more PDFs than probably people in this country, right? And a lot of times those PDFs are broken down into chapters, etc. So we want to give that information context, right? The average layman has no idea what draft environmental assessment for the proposed infrastructure improvement for the Yucca Mountain project, whatever.
I know what that is.
Okay, well you do.
Yeah. My wife's works.
So you're not an average layman. But by giving it context, you can actually have more than this. But by giving it context with some descriptions, etc., it does two things. One, again, the person who's actually supposed to be consuming the content can see what's also related. Sorry to the people who are watching the video. They can actually see what's going on related to the content, right? But two, because the people who are creating content behind the scenes within the departments have to go through and actually provide context to the documents, they now are able to spend time and due diligence to see, whoa, does the document even need to be out here? It's the difference between just, well, we have 20,000 PDFs, and our last CMS, had a reference all those. It's like, well, we're just going to move all those over? Yeah, we're just going to move them all over. Okay, so you basically have the manpower to go through each one to make sure that that actually has some useful information, correct? No, we don't. Oh, okay, so then you should probably prioritize that content, because ultimately having 20,000 PDFs out there just for whatever doesn't help anyone, right? So it causes them to think as well. And again, that goes back to the platform idea.
Something else that's kind of interesting about the content on the DOE site, I don't know if we have a slide for it or not, but I mean, we everybody here has blogged at some point, right? And you write content, and you'll have like tags and stuff that you can associate it, so you have different ways of categorizing it that way. Every piece of content on the DOE site is connected through at least like 2 or 3 different taxonomies. Either based on the office that they're underneath with a group. We have a location-based taxonomy, so if an article is reflecting something that's happening here in Iowa, we can categorize it that way. They have their own internal hierarchy of things, so like solar power or solar energy, solar panels, yada yada yada. So I mean, like every piece of content that goes into the site has to be categorized in a few different ways, and while that makes input a little bit harder, it makes the content that much easier to find and just significantly more useful, because again, if you can't find it, it's not useful to anybody. So
and that's a key, right? Because if we were to go multi-site, those connections across departments of where the NEPA office put something on the Yucca Mountains, and then the nuclear office put something in Yucca Mountains, because they're sharing similar taxonomies, those things can have a relationship. Whereas multi-site, domain access, those firewalls that basically reflect how they're organized within the organization, right? You're just basically replicating in the technology space what they are in real space, which doesn't help the user and doesn't help the entire department become more efficient. Yes?
Could you talk a little bit about how you created those taxonomies in terms of, did you set these officials or business users down in front of this long list of PDFs and say, okay, start tagging? Or did you allow them to create terms? Did they create
Sure. So the question was, for people on the video, and I probably should have done this in my last 2 sessions, I apologize, was how did the taxonomies actually get in there? Did we sit them down? Did they create them themselves? So, again, in the context of a platform build, you have different user types. Okay, you have client owners, those who actually own the website, it's their budgets, etc., etc. You have site administrators who probably work for the client owners, those who are going to be responsible for that internal training, those who are going to have access to those more advanced tools like block configuration, views, etc. And then you have group administrators or group content creators, where within the purview of their department, okay, that person is just responsible for creating that content and having that taxonomy or whatever it is. the kind of secret sauce that we really didn't talk about specifically with this project is organic groups. Each office is its own organic group. And so organic groups gives you that possibility to have soft barriers between your content. It's not an exclusive barrier like literally being on a different platform or a different install or whatever. It's kind of a soft barrier. So the way that we handled the shared taxonomy and the self-created taxonomy in terms of the governance, they actually have both. There's group-specific taxonomy. So a particular group can have a list of terms that they essentially work with their internal client owners to build. And if they need new taxonomy terms, they can talk to the client owners and they can build that taxonomy specific to their department. So therefore, if they have internal documents or documents that are specific to what they're doing, they can tag it with that. But then we also have shared taxonomy, category, keywords, etc., things that are shared across all the departments. Now the key is that for those taxonomies that are shared, that can be easily user created or whatever it is, what's the most important part? To make sure good data going in so you get good data coming out, right? And a lot of times user error or other things can really pollute your taxonomy, your keywords, your tags, or whatever it is. So the solutions that we're actually coming up to now is providing ways to clean that up. It goes back to the clients to provide the appropriate training of how to use certain things. We can build certain solutions to maybe make those matches for them. So if they put in Chicago and they misspell it and it should be, whatever, we can create a validation to say, well, you're adding a new term, your role doesn't provide that functionality. Did you mean this? This is what it's called, etc. We can build those tools for them. And that's always important with the platform, is that you want to build a tool so that the client can be somewhat self-sufficient. Whether that's a tool to make user input easy, whether that's a tool to make user input valid, whether that's a tool to give powers to the site admins to say, oh, look at this office. They've created 1,000 keywords. Why are they doing it? I need to go down there and talk to them and be like, you're not using it correctly. The fact that they even know how to do that is because we built a tool where they can create a report of keywords or taxonomies by office, etc. So we're kind of dealing with that, in a two-headed fashion. All right, so we talked about basic nodes, content, etc. We're also using nodes for layout. Okay, so some of you have been to the theming sessions and you've learned about page.tpl and html.tpl and node.tpl, etc. And we're using that. We actually only have a total of 7 TPLs, even though we have, X amount of different layouts. And it's mainly because not only do we have content types, and in Drupal 7 they're called bundles, but not only do we have content types for content, we have content types for layout. Okay? How does that work? Okay? If we're looking at the home page, again, here's the layout of the home page. You have this region with the hero, right, the top red rectangle. Then you have 3 different regions below there, right, for different columns. Okay? You got a region over here for this type of content. Okay? And what we're doing is we're taking this idea of where content is placed and making those into fields on nodes. Okay? So if you actually look at the form, this first form is that custom hero at the top, right? It's a custom field that we built for them to be able to add a static image or a video in that particular spot. They can add a headline, they can add media, and they can add as many as they want. And as many as they add, that'll put itself inside the slideshow. Okay? For that bottom part, we actually have fields for the different areas of that particular page. So we have a field called blocks left, and they can add as many blocks as they want. Blocks center, blocks right, right sidebar blocks, bottom blocks, top blocks. These are all fields inside of the home page content type, because in this case, we've built a content type that is a type of layout. Okay? Why is that awesome? Because now, any office can build what? Their own home page. Right? Because it's just a content type. Just like they build another article or page or whatever, they can build their own one. And if you have different content types or different layouts, now offices can have different layouts, but they're still within the purview of your design of your platform. right? Because you designed your theme to support those different layouts. But instead of having many themes per office, you have one theme that's flexible enough to use multiple, essentially, node layouts using these fields. What's special about these fields, and we'll kind of get into that a little bit later, is that these are block reference fields, right? So that's a module. Who's heard of node reference? Anybody know a node reference field? Taxonomy reference, all that stuff, right? Those are just fields where you can reference other content. These are block reference fields, okay? So they get to pick and choose what blocks go in that area, right? You want to talk about Bean?
You're probably better.
Okay. So what kind of blocks can they put in there? All right, so you can make static blocks where they just show links or pictures or whatever. There's another module out there which I'll encourage you to try. It's called Bean. Who can tell me what Bean stands for? You. That's right. Block entities ain't nodes. What that means is blocks now have fields. That's pretty cool, right? Because now nodes have fields and you have your node stuff. Node for content. Now we have content types that are layout that can reference blocks that also have fields. So now you have a block that could have a field for like an image, a set of links, a node reference, whatever it is. And you're basically giving a group or department or office a way for them to make their own blocks with their own field content, then go into their layout node and pick which block and where they want it to be. Right? That's pretty cool, and it's still underneath the one platform install. And we still get all those cool savings that we talked about before with sharing content or whatever it is. So let's think about that, right? The main office, Energy.gov, the main kind of one that kind of trickles down, makes a news block, a block that shows the latest news, or we make it for them, right? And we just say we call it a news block. We could make that block smart enough to know where it is when it's being placed, right? Because we're using organic groups, if the block is in the energy group, we show Energy.gov news. If it's in the nuclear one, because they added their own landing page or home page, and we've associated that node to their group, if they put that block in their right sidebar field, we show the nuclear news items, right? So now we've had one block, we've only made one, that's smart enough to now change its content based on how it's placed, right? Which is a very different concept than a lot of people are used to, especially if you go the node layout route.
Another interesting part about using the nodes and fields as layout components too is that, as we're building out the platform, one of the questions I initially had when I first started on the project was I saw like we have these node pages that have all these things, and I'm like, well, that's what panels is for. That's what you do that, right? Because you have these different blocks and areas and that kind of thing, and for many different use cases, panels still is a great solution for that. But what we're dealing with on Energy.gov specifically is, like we've talked about, we have all these different organizations that are trying to do similar things on the platform, but everybody's going to want their own little tweak to it. It's I have a specific, I want to be able to turn on these kinds of filters, or I want to only show this type of thing, or I only want to, show content on Tuesdays or something. Any number of odd requests. And if you're running those things through modules like views and panels that are really built towards a few small number of administrators who basically have access to everything, that it gets complicated because all of a sudden you have 30 or 40 views or 30 or 40 different panels that you have to maintain. Whereas if you can build something that you can extend and you can say, well, with all these so we're talking about beans, and we can add fields to those. Well, fields can be hidden and displayed based on permissions. So if I have access based off of a certain permission level on my user, I can say, well, you don't have access to turn this switch on and off as an administrator. So it gives us a certain amount of customization that would be significantly harder to do with something like views or panels.
All right, so the last session that I had was about state machine and workflow. And one of the key assumptions with that working is that the node is kind of the king of the mountain, right? Nodes out of the box with Drupal, they get revisions, right? Everyone know what I'm talking about, that little create revisions checkbox on the node edit form, right? Revisions are cool because you can have multiple versions of a particular node. Well, we use those multiple versions as workflow for content. So if something's already published, when you want to edit it, but you don't want that to be right away because you want that to go through some workflow, we just keep creating revisions. And then when that's ready to be published, we'll just change that to the top revision. Okay? Because nodes are not only content, but their layout, now what does that do? You can actually preview your site because you're using the node as different layouts for different things. So if someone says, well, actually, I want that block to be in this corner, instead of publishing that right away and then it blowing it up, because that layout is a node and that node can go through workflow via revisions, you can see what that revision will look like before it actually gets published, i.e., you can see what a page looks like before it gets published. So if you place a block, add a block, take a block away, etc., and you create a new revision using our workflow engine, you can essentially have a faux site preview. And that's pretty cool too, right? Because no one wants to be the person who published something and then they get all the calls at the Energy.gov office like, why the hell does the site look like this? Because you put this ugly block on the right-hand corner, right? No one wants to get that call. What does that look like? So this is a screen capture of what a workflow, what state machine looks like and stateflow looks like when you turn it on to put nodes through workflow. So when you turn it on in Drupal, everyone knows what I'm talking about when they say the node tab, right? You go to a node object and you get the node, the view tab, and then the edit tab, right? Right next to the edit tab is a workflow tab. This is what's on the workflow tab, okay? So what do we have here? We have the status of that particular node. Is it published? Is it not? Is it within a particular state? We have the revision that node is at. Okay, and as I mentioned in my last call, why is that revision number so high? Because Energy.gov is gigantic. They are at revision 1,500,000 whatever.
Your taxonomy.
Exactly. Right? What can you do from this? You can unpublish it. Pretty straightforward. But at the same time, right, you can see other revisions that have existed on this particular piece of content. And if that revision needs to go through its own workflow before it gets to publish, you can do that. Then we also have a history. This is what's all offered out of the box with the state machine stuff. And because it uses nodes and how nodes are handled within Drupal, all this just works. Right? It's just using how core handles revisions and takes that to workflow. And if you couple that with not only content but also layouts, now you have, again, site previews and layouts and all this really cool stuff. So now an office who hires an intern or whatever can say, go ahead and build out that site, you know, put this block here, add this piece of content here, and I kind of want to see what all that looks like. And they don't have to worry about that intern ever accidentally publishing something that shouldn't have been published because you just don't give that intern that permission. Right? And they can build out to their heart's content, and it's pretty cool. Do you want to add anything? Okay.
What he said.
All right, nodes. So we talked about content, we talked about layout. Now I'm going to talk about this kind of somewhat developer-y topic called embeds, right? An embed, all it really is taking something that views might create and putting it as part of the node display. I'm embedding the view inside the node display. Why is that cool? Because, as Brendan was alluding to earlier, Office A wants a view with this filter and this sort and ascending. Office B wants that same view, but they want it in descending. And Office C wants that same view, but they don't want any sort. They want it random, right? Typically, when you build that view, you either build 3 views or you build 1 view with 3 different displays, right? You change the view every time someone wants something different. Now multiply that by 40 offices. And multiply that by, I don't know, 100 administrators. So now what do you have? You either have 30 different views with X amount of different displays. Now you're the developer. Hey, developer, you know that view you built for me? Which office are you again? I'm Office D. Oh, okay. Yeah, you know that view you built for me? It's not working. Cool. I'll go to Structure Views, the admin screen, and look at it. Oh, crap. There are 40 views here with 40 displays. Which one am I going to look at? Right? I have now made my life really, really difficult. How do I get around that? Well, what you can do is you could build a single view with all the options, okay, and put fields on a node to pass in the values of those options to the view. So they don't ever have to look at the view, they don't have to manipulate the view, but they can control how the view works via fields that they fill out when they're creating the node. That's pretty cool, right? So you could do something where they can create a calendar node, and on that node is the calendar display. I heard someone talking about views and calendars earlier. Is that you? Yeah. Everyone knows about views and calendars. Okay, calendars. Right? So what if, again, in this use case, Office A wants a calendar, but they want to be able to create a calendar and filter it by, you know, cool events. And then they want to create another calendar page, but they want to filter it by awesome events, right? Instead of building 2 views for that one person or 1 view with 2 displays with those different filters, etc., because they're not going to have access to that admin view. They don't have that permission. You could build 1 view that accepts those filters as arguments, okay? And depending upon how you pass that argument to the view, right, you make that argument a field on the node. And just a regular list or text option field. Then you write, that's why I say a little bit developer-y, you write a custom module to embed the view when the node is being viewed. Okay, so here's an example of a calendar node. This is the content piece, where they can add all this really cool stuff about a calendar, body fields, image fields, whatever. But then as part of that form, they can pick what the calendar view, what should be in this particular display. They can even pick what display it is, right? Because there are different displays. There's month view, week view, day view, list view, etc. Right? What does that look like? Here's the node form. I have my title, and then I've got this really cool filters thing. This isn't anything special. All it is just text fields, list fields, whatever. And what we're doing is that we're taking the value that they put in here, event display option, event type, display, whatever, and passing that into the view as an argument. When you embed that view, it then looks at those values and then shows the view right there in the node. So now you've given them the power of views and all the cool stuff it does without having to build a whole bunch of views. You didn't have to give them views, but they get views. And it's revisionable because it's a node, and nodes are awesome. Right? Nodes are more than content. So you can kind of see how we are taking the idea of nodes and all the cool things that Drupal provides out of the core to meet this need of a giant organization with hundreds of different interests and providing them tools where they feel like they have control of their content. They're not locked into one way of doing things, but we lock them in just enough where the content is related to each other, the taxonomy is related to each other, right? People don't have ugly websites. We don't want some random blue Energy.gov sitting out there somewhere. That would look crazy, especially after your taxpayer money just spent, right, doing a redesign. That makes no sense. Okay? Did you want to add anything to this? All right. Almost done. listings, right? This is kind of like views too, but a little bit different. So instead of actually embedding the view directly into how the node is displayed, we could actually use those fields on the node as filters to show a listing of nodes, right? So this is cool. So what if, good use case, right? A lot of people go to the Energy.gov website. I'm a regular homeowner. I can probably find what I want. But let's say I am a doctor researching new composites for solar panels, right? And the Office of Solar Power has some really cool articles that are made just for me. Wouldn't it be awesome if they could create a listing of particular documents tagged with that use case, maybe doctorate level PDFs or whatever it is, and then create a link and say, hey, you're a doctor, you like solar panels, go to this page. Here's a list of all the things that we've tagged, and it automatically updates, right? Instead of giving them views, we can just give them the node. And then again, the node filters a listing of content. For those who are at my first session, we use Entity Field Query to grab a list of nodes based on those filters. What does that look like? Here's an example of a listing type, right? So it's a new content type, and it has the basic stuff. You put in your content, and you get the content stuff up here. But it's even more awesome because they can provide a listing that automatically grabs this stuff that's inside the platform, and they can create this cool little custom widget for the user. So if the user is like, oh, that's cool, the solar stuff, what if I just want to flip to fossil stuff? They can expose that as an option if they want. What does that look like? Same node form, right? Regular text fields, but instead of embedding a view, we're just passing these filters to a query mechanism. Everyone understand when I say query? Everybody familiar with that term? Cool. A query mechanism that gets a list. We even provide a nice cool option for them to pick and choose which filters they want to expose to the user. So if they want no filters and just show one listing, they can do that. If they want a big listing, but they want to be able to give users ways to kind of manipulate that, they can do that too. I guess I bored that one guy.
It's cool. So another perspective to look at this from, so, you know, I would assume that most of us have used the views admin at some point or another. If you haven't, then basically picture what like a space shuttle cockpit control panel looks like. It's just buttons and widgets and everything all over the place. I mean, compare that to what we have on the screen now. I mean, that is just significantly simpler. I mean, like, you really can't, because we're building this in such a way where it's relatively easy to extend it. Instead of taking views, the views admin, and trying to pare it down and cut it down and that kind of thing, we can kind of slowly build towards whatever the DOE's needs are as the platform continues to mature. And you know, we can still, you know, have a certain amount of control over, like, well, you know, the experience for this kind of sucks, so let's, you know, instead of like 3 checkboxes, let's do like something fancy or something, you know. So it's pretty easy to kind of play around with.
All right. So again, nodes are more than content, right? They can be content, obviously. They can dictate your layout, right? They can help you with your workflow. You can use them from this embedding mechanism that I was describing as like a filtering, and the same can be true for listings. So in Drupal 7, nodes are really, really powerful, and we're exploiting that to not only create better user experiences for the different users of the platform throughout the Energy.gov ecosystem, but also we're using it to save you money as a taxpayer, right? Because a happy government worker and a more efficient government worker hopefully is a person who doesn't spend ridiculous amounts of money that they don't need to spend. In theory, yes. Any questions? Wow, no questions.
It seems like you've gone a long ways off the traditional obvious usage of it. Are there any performance penalties for having done that?
So in our case, We don't have to worry about that yet because most of our traffic is anonymous traffic, and we're using a reverse proxy in front of Energy.gov to serve up the site. For those that don't know what a reverse proxy is, all it basically means is that instead of actually going to the site to hit the database, the site is pushed into memory to a device that sits in front of the web server. So you're never actually hitting the web server in the database, you're hitting a proxy which is just serving up the site in memory. So to answer your question, no, not yet. But our use case, is within the realm of we have a lot of anonymous traffic. And the reverse proxy, it's called Varnish, helps us a lot in not really having to worry about performance too much because rarely do people ever actually go in and hit the server. In terms of actually authenticated users, there's a lot of other performance things you can do, but right now we're still under the 50, 75 authenticated users, and there's not really a lot of concurrent usage, so we're not really seeing that either. Drupal 7 obviously has spent a lot of time making performance and issues better, but yeah, there's some other things outside of what we're doing that haven't shown its head. I do know that EFQ is faster than views, so I try to limit the usage of views as much as I possibly can. But at this point, we haven't really had any bottlenecks when it comes to performance because Varnish is awesome.
Much like Nodes.
Much like Nodes, yes. Yeah.
In theory, could you do the same type of relationship between the node to build a view, to use a node to kind of build an EFQ?
Yeah, that's what we're doing with the listing. So the listing is that. The listing is EFQ, and the node is passing filters. So that's essentially what bean is too, right? A custom bean would be filters of fields, passing an EFQ to get you a listing. So that's what we are doing that, yes. Good question. Yes. No. So, sure. Sure. So, let's pull the curtain from behind the Wizard of Oz thing, right? Okay, so the first thing you need is a really, really great architect. How do you find a great architect? I have no idea. When we have a few. So Energy.gov started last year. We were Treehouse Agency at the time. Okay, Treehouse Agency was about 14 to 15 people deep, and within there was an architect named Roger Lopez. He came up with this scheme of using nodes and workflow, et cetera, et cetera. So when we first started, we started with about 3 or 4 people from Treehouse working on the Energy.gov site. It then whittled down to 2 because then once it was launched, it went into maintenance mode. We then were merged with phase 2, and then it went down to 2 developers again. And now that we're bringing on even more offices, we now have 4 developers on the platform. So the second piece is to stay within your architect's original vision, which is, again, that in this use case, the node is the king of the hill, and the point of adding functionality is to facilitate efficiency and communication between the offices. So if an office wants some ridiculous feature that makes no sense, and we can justify it by saying, well, that doesn't facilitate and doesn't improve the mission, right? Then most of my ammo is, well, it doesn't do that. I'm a taxpayer and I don't want to pay for that. And 3, I don't know, what else do I say? I don't want to build. No, but yeah. So it takes a while. But the key is, in an enterprise level setting, some of the user-specific solutions like views, block administration, etc., break down really fast. And so the purpose of these presentations when I go to camps and stuff is to share, here are some of the enterprise level solutions that work, and here's how you can use it, because some of the things that we commonly talk about, features, views, context, spaces, etc., they don't, expand, they don't scale. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, we say that we don't use these, but I mean, like we use views in a limited extent. We have like a weird way of doing features. We basically do features without the features module, and that helps us prevent some weird merge issues between devs and that kind of thing. And we use a lot of the concepts that you would pull from some of these other, popular modules. It's just that in our particular platform, they would probably fit like 80%, but that last 20% is just a deal breaker, and we kind of need to take the ideas and not so much the actual code.
Right. And to answer your question of how do you figure that out, right, but so his thought process is Drupal is not just a content management system that has a user interface where you can go in and enter stuff. It's also a framework. Okay, it has a list of API functions that you can use. So when you have multiple developers on a project, it makes more sense to approach Drupal as a framework first and utilize the things that are built within core first before you start building modules or writing something that can be configured via UI. When the UI use case is requested from the client, then you build that tool only at that point. But when it comes to actually building functionality, use the API, write the code. Don't use modules that utilize the API to build your things. Use the API in a developer-centric way to build those things. And when, again, the request comes up to say, well, I'm an administrator and I want to be able to manipulate it too, then you build the tool for that one use case. So that's kind of how we figured it out, was, okay, for platforms, Drupal is a framework first, CMS second. Whereas in most use cases, you think Drupal is a CMS first because you can download this module, find this module to get your use case. This module should have a UI. It should be able to go in, right? Pretty much everyone here, when they install a module, they're looking for the configuration screen, right, to figure out, okay, how do I use this thing? It should be adding a button or a field somewhere so I can do what I need to do. And from our perspective, it's kind of the other way around. Core has a lot of functionality that doesn't have a UI component to it. As a developer, you have to read the documentation and get into the documentation to use those first. And then, if the client needs to press the button or click the link or go to the tab, then you build it at that point. And what you end up doing is that you filter your focus on how you're going to build stuff purely based on how the API interacts with itself, not how the UI chooses to build the interaction. Any other questions? Thank you guys. Appreciate it.